"Ma'am, you're currently trespassing on a private lake," said the deputy with a calm but firm tone. Joanne scoffed, standing in a neon windbreaker, holding a megaphone like it was a royal scepter. She raised her chin with indignation and declared, "That's impossible. This lake is HOA property." The deputy pointed to the deed I handed over with a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Nope. It's literally named Lake Roden, after him. You're standing in his pond." Joanne stared down at her paddleboard, her face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally a stubborn refusal to accept reality. She muttered in a voice barely above a whisper, "But I already scheduled yoga classes here. Let me back up and explain how we got to this moment of beautiful, poetic justice. My name is Roden Price, and I'm a retired geologist with simple pleasures in life. I love the sound of silence, the art of fly fishing, and the smooth burn of good scotch while sitting on the dock of my serene, spring-fed lake nestled behind my cabin in Aspen Brier Reserve. The key word there is my lake. I owned this land long before the HOA was even a twinkle in some developer's eye. Enter Joanne Dipple, HOA chairwoman, certified know-it-all, and self-declared waterfront director, despite the HOA having absolutely no actual access to any water whatsoever. She wore her title like a badge of honor at every community meeting, wielding her position with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I lived quietly at the edge of the HOA community boundary, where my private lake sparkled just beyond this property is not HOA marker I had installed. Actually, I had installed it 3 times because each one mysteriously vanished within weeks of being put up. Funny how that works. The whole mess started innocently enough with families wandering onto my dock just for pictures. I'm not heartless, so I let it slide the first few times. But then came the HOA fishing tournament, hosted on my shoreline without any notice, permission, or even the courtesy of a heads-up. I woke up one Saturday morning to find 30 people with fishing poles standing on my property like they owned the place. The aftermath was worse than the event itself. I found folding chairs abandoned on my lawn, Red Bull cans floating in the water, and somehow, inexplicably, a Cho wrapper inside my personal kayak. When I marched over to Joanne's house to ask her to put a stop to it, she smiled that condescending smile of hers and said in a sickeningly sweet voice, "The community needs nature, Mr. Price. You can't hoard the view." That should have been my first clue that this woman had completely lost touch with reality and property law. But no, Joanne was just getting started with her campaign of aquatic annexation. First, she installed a floating HOA swim zone buoy line across my lake without asking. I discovered this gem when I went out for my morning paddle and nearly clotheslined myself on the rope. Then she scheduled paddleboard yoga every Saturday at 7 a.m. sharp, advertising it on the community board as Lakefront Wellness with Joanne. The woman actually posted on the neighborhood app, and I quote, "No private lakes allowed in Aspen Brier," as if she could simply declare my property rights null and void through the power of social media. The responses ranged from confused to supportive, with most people assuming she must be right because she said it with such confidence. But the crown jewel of her delusion came when she claimed I was grandfathered in as a guest user of the lake I literally owned. She actually typed up a document on HOA letterhead granting me limited access privileges to my own property, Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., weather permitting. Things reached a boiling point when Joanne called the police on me. Yes, you heard that right. She called 911 to report that I was verbally assaulting community guests after I had asked a group of 20-somethings to please stop skinny dipping in my lake at 2 in the morning. Apparently, telling people to get off your property while they're nude and drunk constitutes assault in Joanne's twisted interpretation of the law. When Sheriff Davidson arrived, Joanne triumphantly handed him what she called an HOA lake license that she had laminated for the occasion. The sheriff looked at it, looked at her, looked at me, and then laughed so hard he had to lean against his patrol car for support. He actually took a photo of it with his phone, telling us it was going on his wall of dumb at the station, right between the guy who tried to pay a speeding ticket with Monopoly money and the woman who reported her neighbor for aggressive lawn mowing. At that point, I had reached my limit. I called my lawyer, a wonderful man named Marcus who specialized in property disputes and had a particular fondness for putting HOA boards in their place. We filed a cease and desist against the HOA that very afternoon. But the real knockout punch came when I pulled out the original 1968 deed to my property. The document explicitly marked the lake and surrounding 2 acres as private property with absolutely no HOA access rights, easements, or any other legal wiggle room. The deed actually predated the HOA incorporation by 15 years. Joanne's face when Marcus presented this at the emergency HOA meeting was like watching someone realize they'd been playing poker with Monopoly money all night. The county government stepped in faster than you could say trespassing violation. Joanne was served legal notice to immediately remove all floating HOA structures, signage, and digital listings claiming lake access. The county clerk, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, personally supervised the removal of the buoy lines while Joanne stood on the shore making vague threats about property value impacts. Meanwhile, I decided to make my boundaries crystal clear. I built a 6-foot fence around the lake perimeter with a locked dock gate that required a key code to access. For good measure, I added motion-activated sprinklers that would give any trespasser an unexpected shower. But my favorite addition was the weatherproof speaker system that played a pre-recorded message from Marcus whenever someone got too close. His stern voice would boom across the water saying, "You are illegally trespassing on private property. You will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Also, this is my lake." That last part was my idea, and Marcus thought it was hilarious. But Joanne, bless her delusional heart, still refused to accept defeat. In what can only be described as a spectacular display of denial, she tried hosting one last lake appreciation BBQ on what she kept calling the community waterfront. She sent out invitations, ordered catering, and even hired a local band to play Jimmy Buffett covers. Unfortunately for her, the local news had picked up the story after someone posted the sheriff's wall of dumb photo online, and it had gone viral. A camera crew from Channel 7 showed up to cover what they were calling the Battle of Lake Roden. They captured the exact moment when Deputy Chen and Deputy Martinez escorted Joanne off my property while she clutched a plate of ribs and screamed at the top of her lungs, "But it's for the neighborhood." The barbecue sauce dripping down her arm as she gestured wildly really sold the whole scene. The footage made the evening news, the late-night news, and by morning, it was trending on social media with the hashtag Lake Karen. Someone even made a remix of her screaming "But it's for the neighborhood" with electronic music, and it got 2 million views in 3 days. The legal consequences came swift and harsh. The HOA was fined $12,500 for repeated trespassing violations and false advertising of amenities to potential homebuyers. They had been marketing homes in Aspen Brier Reserve as having lake access for the past 2 years, showing photos of my lake in their promotional materials. Marcus, ever the professional with a sense of humor, had the check from the settlement framed and gave it to me as a housewarming gift. It now hangs in my cabin right above my collection of vintage fishing lures, a permanent reminder of the summer Joanne learned what private property means. But the real consequences hit Joanne personally. The HOA board held an emergency vote of no confidence, and she was removed from her position by a margin of 47-3. The 3 votes in her favor were from her husband, her sister, and surprisingly, the guy who runs the community garden and apparently owed her a favor. As for her professional life, Joanne's real estate license came under review when the state board discovered she had been falsely advertising lake access properties. She was fined an additional $8,000 and had her license suspended for 2 years. The final blow came when the YMCA, where she had retreated to teach her paddleboard yoga classes, informed her that she could only use the parking lot for her dry land demonstrations since their insurance wouldn't cover her near any actual water after seeing the news coverage. Joanne now teaches paddleboard yoga in the YMCA parking lot on a wooden platform she built herself, making ocean sounds with her mouth while her 3 remaining students pretend to paddle on stationary boards. The look on her face when she received the combined $20,500 in fines and legal fees was captured by the news crew. Her jaw dropped, her eyes went wide, and she whispered in a broken voice, "But I was protecting property values."